Story 1. Dwelling in the Silent Corridor. When Amelia Peterson arrived at Belmont Residences, spring had just begun to warm the streets of the small town. Rows of colonial-style houses stood neatly aligned, their white paint pristine, their tiny gardens blooming with early flowers. Belmont looked like a scene pulled from an old postcard. Too perfect, Amelia thought. Almost too quiet. She'd just landed a contract as a business consultant for a local company and decided to rent a small house at the far end of the street, house number 47. Just 6 months, she thought. Long enough to enjoy some peace, but short enough not to get attached after years of city chaos. But that peace, she soon realised, felt unnatural. On her first night, after unpacking part of her luggage and setting up her laptop, Amelia stood by the large living room window. Across the street, house number 48 sat in darkness. No lights, no movement, yet she felt something, like a gaze from behind the dark glass. She chuckled nervously. Of course the house was empty. She hadn't seen any cars or signs of life. Night deepened. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet house. Amid the stillness, she heard it, a knocking sound. 1, 2, 3 gentle knocks, like fingertips against glass. Amelia froze. She stared at the front door. Nothing. She peeked through the window. Empty street. Probably just the house settling, she told herself. Old houses made strange noises, but the knocking returned the next night. And the night after that. Days passed. Amelia began to meet a few neighbours. Mrs. Langley from House 45, an elderly woman with a vacant smile. Then Tom and Valerie from House 44, a busy young couple who barely had time to chat. Everyone at Belmont seemed polite, too polite, like actors playing a role. One afternoon, during a light jog, Amelia passed by House 48 again. She stopped. There, a flicker of movement behind the second-floor curtains. As quickly as she noticed, it vanished. When she asked Mrs. Langley about the house, the old woman simply smiled thinly and said, "No one lives there, dear. It's been empty for a long time. Best not to pay it much mind." But Amelia couldn't ignore it. Each night, the knocking grew louder. Sometimes at the front door, sometimes at the kitchen window, sometimes from inside the walls. It reached a climax on Amelia's 30th night there. Rain poured relentlessly, drumming against the roof with a dull rhythm. Amelia sat on her sofa, staring at her laptop without really working. The air felt heavy, charged, almost suffocating. Then came the knock, not from the door, not from the windows, from the roof. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps across the shingles. Amelia held her breath. She turned off all the lights. The footsteps moved, slowly, steadily, from the roof to the small balcony upstairs. Then, knocking at her bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. With trembling hands, Amelia grabbed her phone to call 911. No signal. Heart pounding, she picked up a flashlight and ascended the stairs. Each step creaked under her weight. The beam of light quivered in her hand. At the bedroom door, the knocking stopped. She approached the window, slowly pulled a curtain aside. Nothing, just the shadow of trees swaying under the storm. She exhaled. That's when she saw it. A faint reflection in the glass. A man standing behind her, his face blank, his eyes endless black. Amelia spun around. The room was empty. The next day, Amelia couldn't stay silent. She went straight to the real estate office that had rented her the house. The woman at the front desk paled when she heard the address. "House number 47, she murmured. Amelia nodded. The woman looked around nervously and lowered her voice. That house, it was involved in a case years ago. You should know. The previous tenant, also a young woman, she was found dead inside. They said she fell from the upstairs balcony. But what? Amelia pressed. The woman swallowed. Some believe she was pushed, but no one saw anyone else that night. Since then, no tenant has lasted long. Amelia left the office with her heart pounding. That night, she locked every door and window. She kept every light on. She would not let anything in. At 2 a.m, all the lights went out at once. The house drowned in darkness. From the upstairs corridor, she heard footsteps, slow, heavy, getting closer. Amelia bolted from the house, running barefoot onto the empty street, screaming for help. The lights in the surrounding houses remained dark. No doors opened, no one came. She turned back. From the second-story window of her house, a figure was staring down at her, its face an unsettling mirror of her own. Amelia left Belmont that very night. She never returned. Rumours still whisper that house number 47 remains vacant. But every night, from the street, some swear they can still see a young woman standing in the window, tapping against the glass, waiting for someone to come home. Story 2. The Hallway of Nocturne Apartments. Ethan Parker stepped into Nocturne Apartments on a gloomy afternoon, suitcase in hand and a dead phone in his jacket pocket. This town, Greystone, was tucked away in northern Illinois, far from the chaos of Chicago, but lively enough for him to open a new branch of his small online music gear business. Ethan planned to stay in Greystone for 6 months, maybe longer if things went well. Nocturne Apartments loomed over the surrounding buildings, a shadow of the past among newer structures. The building was aged but barely maintained. The paint peeled along the edges, and its tall windows reflected the overcast sky in a grim shimmer. An old man in a dusty suit at the lobby handed Ethan the key to Unit 704. "Don't stay out too late," the man said, never looking Ethan in the eye. "Just advice," he added, after an awkward pause. Ethan chuckled to himself and stepped into the elevator, which shuddered lightly as it rose. The 7th floor hallway greeted him with grey, worn walls and a deep red carpet that smelled of dampness. Dim yellow lights hung from the ceiling, swinging gently from some unseen draft. Unit 704 was decent enough. Simple furnishings, a small sofa, a double bed, a modest dining table with 2 chairs. The place felt empty, utterly silent. He dropped his suitcase and exhaled deeply. The first day passed without much trouble, but the night came, strangely. At exactly 2:13 a.m, Ethan woke to the sound of knocking. Tap, 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 not at his door, from the hallway. Sitting up, he listened intently. Silence. Then faint footsteps, tiny, like those of a child, running along the hallway outside. He got up and crept to the door, pressing his ear against it. Soft whispers floated through the crack, as if a child were talking to themselves. "Daddy said I was naughty." Then a small giggle, then silence. Ethan slowly opened the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty. The ceiling lights swung harder now, casting moving shadows along the walls. He shut the door quickly and forced himself back to sleep, blaming exhaustion and overactive imagination. The days that followed grew, unsettling. Every night the footsteps returned, sometimes accompanied by laughter, other times soft sobs. On the 4th night, while preparing some business reports, a brief power outage plunged the apartment into darkness. In that fleeting moment, Ethan saw, standing in the hallway, through the small peephole window, a tiny figure staring directly at his door. When the lights flickered back on, the hallway was empty again. He asked the receptionist the next morning. "Children?" The old man frowned. "No kids live in Nocturne." Ethan pressed him, but the man simply shook his head and whispered, "Some noises are better left alone." By the second week, Ethan's nerves were fraying. He found small handprints smudged on his bathroom mirror, despite living alone. At night, kitchen cabinets swung open on their own. The tap water ran even after being tightly shut. But the worst was the elevator. Nocturne's elevator seemed to act of its own will some nights, rising and falling repeatedly without anyone calling it. The familiar ding of the doors opening echoed through the halls. One night, at exactly 1:47 a.m, Ethan heard the elevator stop on the 7th floor. Ding! Tiny footsteps scampered down the hallway. 3 knocks, fast, light, rattled his door. Ethan froze. He grabbed the door handle and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. But just as he stepped back, he heard it. A soft whisper from right outside his door. "Come play with me." By the 3rd weekend, Ethan decided to leave. He couldn't take it anymore. He packed a small bag and planned to stay at a hotel until he found another place. When he went to lock his apartment, he found the elevator broken. He had to use the stairwell. Dragging his suitcase, he headed for the emergency stairs, narrow, musty-smelling, poorly lit. On the 5th floor landing, something caught his eye. A doll, or what looked like one, sat in the corner of the stairs. As he approached, the doll moved. A small child, long hair covering her face, sat facing the wall, rocking back and forth slowly. Ethan stood frozen. The little girl whispered hoarsely, "Don't leave me." Without thinking, Ethan turned around and bolted back up the stairs. When he slammed the 7th floor door behind him, he could hear it, the sound of tiny feet running after him. After that night, everything escalated. The 4th week was hell. Ethan began hearing the child inside his apartment, footsteps darting across the kitchen, shadows slipping past the corners of his vision. His sleep was broken and fitful. He barely left the apartment. Each night, the knocking grew louder, angrier. One night, Ethan sat on his sofa, all the lights in the apartment turned on, staring at the door. The clock struck 2 a.m. The first knock, the second, the third. The door shivered in its frame. Underneath the door, Ethan saw it. A small dirty hand, thin and pale, slipping through the gap, blindly searching. He backed away slowly, his body trembling. The door shook harder. A child sobbing filled the room. Then all the lights went out. Pitch blackness swallowed the apartment. Close to his ear, he heard breathing, warm, shallow, and a whisper, "You're staying here with me." The next morning, Ethan fled. He didn't even finish packing. He didn't care about his business or breaking the lease. He just wanted out. The elevator was still broken. He had no choice but to take the stairs. As he descended, passing the 6th floor, he heard it again. Tiny footsteps, from below and above. He sprinted, heart hammering. When he reached the ground floor, the stairwell door slammed shut behind him with a violent bang, nearly hitting his back. He didn't look back. Out in the cold morning air, he breathed in deeply, shaking. He left his key at the lobby without a word. Weeks later, living in a modest hotel across town, Ethan tried to piece together what had happened. He scoured local archives and found an old article buried deep in the digital files. Tragic death at Nocturne Apartments. 7-year-old falls from stairwell. According to police reports from 1983, a young girl named Emily fell from the 7th floor to the ground floor at Nocturne Apartments after being left unattended. Unofficial reports from her mother suggested Emily often spoke to friends she saw in the hallways and elevator. A small photo of the girl was attached. Long dark hair, wide eyes, a little white dress, exactly as Ethan had seen. Ethan never returned to Nocturne, but sometimes in the quiet nights at the hotel, he hears knocking at his door. Sometimes when he peeks out, no one's there. Sometimes he thinks he sees tiny footprints in the carpet. But he's learned something. Some noises are better left alone, and some doors should never be opened. Story 3. Scary Boarding House. My name is Jackson. I had just moved from a small village in Kentucky to a small town called Ashgrove in the state of Oregon. Everything felt strange. The busy streets, the distant sound of sirens, and the city's cold air, even though it was already May. I found this boarding house from an online ad. An old Victorian-style house turned into a room rental, located on the outskirts of town. The building was worn down, with peeling white paint and large wooden-framed windows that looked grimy. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Weaver, welcomed me when I arrived. She seemed friendly, though there was something in her eyes, a deep, tired sadness. "There are a lot of empty rooms," she said, as she handed me a rusty key. "But I will place you on the 2nd floor." Room number 7. I asked why there were so many vacancies. She only gave a thin smile. "People come and go," she replied shortly. Room 7, located at the end of a long corridor on the 2nd floor. As I walked there, I passed several other doors, some tightly shut, others slightly ajar, revealing dusty empty rooms. The corridor was narrow, lined with a faded, musty red carpet. My footsteps echoed as I moved. When I entered the room, I immediately felt something was off. It was cold even though the sun was shining brightly outside. The room was simple. A single iron bed, a small wooden desk, and a window overlooking the backyard where old maple trees towered. I put down my suitcase and tried to calm myself. Just nerves, I thought. The first night, I couldn't sleep. I heard sounds from the room next door. Knocking 3 times. Software. I squinted, listening carefully. Then a scraping sound, like someone dragging something across the wooden floor. I checked the clock. 2:46 a.m. I figured maybe it was just a neighbour. I was new and I hadn't met everyone yet. But when I asked Mrs. Weaver the next day, she only shrugged. "The room next to yours is empty," she said. I swallowed hard. "Empty?" "Yes, it's been vacant for a month," she answered, while flipping through a large ledger on her desk, not even looking at me. I tried not to think about it. Maybe it was noise from downstairs, or from the street. The next night, I slept with the lights on. At 2:30 a.m, the sound came again. Knocking. 3 times. Louder. I sat up in bed, my body tense. The scraping sound came again, this time longer. Like someone was dragging their fingernails across the wall. I pressed my ear against the wall. Silence. Deafening silence. Suddenly from the other side of the wall, I heard it, whispering. The voice was hoarse, almost a whimper. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it was human. I backed away from the wall, heart hammering. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I met another tenant, a young man named Caleb. We chatted while sitting on the porch. "I heard noises from the room next to mine," I said carefully, "but they said it's empty." Caleb went quiet. His face stiffened. "You got room 7? He he asked. I nodded. He took a deep breath. A girl killed herself in the room next to yours last month. Her name was Lila. My blood ran cold. What happened? Caleb shook his head. Nobody really knows. Some said she complained about feeling followed, hearing things at night. Eventually, she hanged herself in her room. I swallowed hard. Why not close it off? Caleb shrugged. Mrs. Weaver needs the money. And well, small town, word gets around. I looked up at my window, a sick feeling churning in my stomach. The third night, I tried to prepare myself. I bought candles, salt, and a small Bible. I didn't know why, maybe just from watching too many horror movies. I lined the door and window sills with salt, then prayed silently before sleeping. At 2:45 a.m., knocking 3 times, louder, angrier. I clutched the Bible tightly. The scraping sound came again, but this time it wasn't from the floor. It came from above. I looked up. The sound of nails scratching across the ceiling. I barely dared to breathe. Then I heard it. Heavy breathing. Breath right above my head. Something was crawling across the ceiling. Slowly, I turned my eyes toward the corner of the room. There, in the shadows, I saw something. A face pale with hollow eyes and a gaping, ripped mouth, peering down from the ceiling corner, sticking unnaturally, like some monstrous insect. I screamed and fell off the bed. The face moved, sliding along the wall toward me. I crawled to the door, trying to open it, but the door wouldn't budge, as if something was holding it shut from the other side. Behind me, I heard whispering, this time clearly. A woman's voice. Help me! Help me out! Help me! I threw my body against the door with all my strength. Finally, it burst open. I ran down the stairs without looking back. I spent that night in a cheap motel. The next morning, I returned to the boarding house to collect my things. Mrs. Weaver greeted me on the porch, acting completely normal, as if nothing had happened. I just told her I wouldn't be staying, without explaining anything. As I packed my stuff, I noticed something in the room. There were long scratch marks across the entire ceiling, as if someone had clawed at it desperately. On the small desk, there was a photo that hadn't been there before. I picked it up. It was a photo of a young woman smiling, dark hair, large eyes. I left that place as quickly as I could, never looking back. To this day, I still wonder, did she only want to be heard? Or was there something darker still lurking in that next room? And sometimes, when the night is very quiet, I swear I can hear 3 knocks on the wall, even in my new house.